Hi, everybody. This is Shannon Q. This is our first live stream, and this is the first, I guess, inaugural Heathen Hour after show.
Yay!
Yay! And I can hear myself back at myself. So there we go. All right, I fixed that. That's my fault. All right. I'm not tech savvy, so everybody has to bear with me. So we are going to have a discussion about whether or not prostitution should be legal. There was just a heated debate that first involved Max Kolbe and Luciano's here joining us as well. And it transitioned into a debate between Luciano and Kyle about the legalization.
I think it's more appropriate to say we're not going to have a discussion on legalizing prostitution. We're going to have a discussion on how many people disagreed with Kyle. I think that's a better way.
We're going to have a respectful discussion.
Or that's the feeling that I'm getting anyways. That's the feeling that I'm getting.
Perfect. Okay, so first, why don't you two both summarize your position, and I'll let Luciano go first and Kyle go second, so that Kyle can have a slight advantage since I think he's going to get dogpiled.
So Kyle can face plant.
Open Pandora's box.
All right, so go ahead, Luciano. Why don't you summarize what your position is for anybody who didn't see? Oh, can you hear? Can you speak, Luciano? You can't. Oh, you're muted.
He's muted. I think he was making food. That's what he said to Kyle and I after the show.
Oh, are you here, Luciano? He's unmuted. Okay.
Well, his position was that it should be legal.
Right, and Kyle, his position is essentially that it should be legalized. Kyle, what's your position?
I don't know. I don't have a opinion one way or the other. I think that there are a lot of negative things that come along with it, but I can't say definitively which way I would go.
Okay, so I have a lot of opinions regarding it. So
sure.
what some of your arguments that you summed up regarding whether or not it should be legalized or not legalized revolved around what you saw as detrimental effects on the women or men who were going into this. Now, do you feel like if there isn't an instance where somebody might make the conscious choice to do this because it's what they actually want for themselves?
Sure, absolutely. I would definitely say there would be. I think that I look at it from basically where I'm coming at it from is that I would look at it as, would I want somebody that I know and love to do that? And I said from the beginning that, well, first of all, I wasn't expecting to to get thrown in there like that, but when Max didn't have an argument either way, but I am not coming at it in any way, shape, or form from any kind of scientific data or anything concrete. It's all based on my emotional response to that particular issue. Okay, and that's it. But go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that I understand that. I understand the emotional response. I mean, it's not something that I would want to choose for myself, and it's not something that if I have a son, if he wanted that, that's not something I would want for him. But I'm still for legalizing and regulating it because I feel like it's something that's going to happen regardless. That obviously it does happen. So the people that are participating would be safer and better taken care of if there was some regulations around it, like they'd have access to healthcare, they'd have steady paychecks, and things like pornography are already legal. So essentially, prostitution is legal so long as there's a camera.
Right. Yeah, I said that.
Kyle, based on the argument you just gave, my mother thinks no one should smoke marijuana. So as far as she would be concerned, she would be delighted if it was illegal, so that if a policeman caught someone smoking it, that they could get them out of it.
Sure.
Like,
Yeah,
I
mean,
really don't see the difference.
And I'm not saying that it should be one way or the other. I don't know, and I'm not. I said the entire time I don't have a decision one way or the other. I think that you have positive things for and negative things for it. I was just kind of pushing the discussion tonight towards those negative things that I saw with it. It wasn't that I'm trying to push a narrative that it should be illegal. I'm bringing up my points for why I think it would be a bad situation or where it could go wrong.
Can I
And
point out something here that I noticed that I caught kind of the tail end of the conversation, but there was one thing, Kyle, that you brought up to Luciano where you asked him, would you be cool with your sister becoming a prostitute?
Right.
And I really don't think that that's the right line of questioning because it's kind of an appeal to emotion. Obviously, nobody wants their sister to become a prostitute. I think the right question to ask is if you're living in a situation where that is what she is going to do regardless, would you rather her do it in an environment or a world where it is legal or where it is illegal? And you can juxtapose two different scenarios. One, you go to like New York City and you have extremely dangerous, high mortality rates, completely unregulated lawlessness, where, someone may be, getting pimped out basically to pay bills and to feed kids, and they're treated like animals, and there's going to be trafficking and stuff there, but you compare that to somewhere where it's legal like Australia, where they have places that are safe, that are heavily regulated, where they inspect people coming in for any visible signs of diseases, and they make them wear protection, and cops will check in and literally give them citations for any kind of violations, legal violations, and try to make sure that it's safe. They make sure that all the girls are not underage, and they ID people similar to how we treat alcohol. Like if we have the FDA regulating food, don't think for a second that they wouldn't regulate stuff like this. So I'm not saying that prostitution is this wonderful, great thing. I'm not saying that any of us would be down with our kids. Shannon, you mentioned, would you want your son to go into that, or your daughter to go into that? Or, obviously nobody is, thinks that it's this glorified profession, but if someone is going to go into that regardless, it's the world's oldest profession. Would you rather them be in a scenario where it's safe and regulated and not criminalized, or a world where they're not just dealing with the dangers of the industry that's completely lawless, like a wild west right now, but then they're also going to jail and having their lives ruined over it?
Sure. I'm not saying that I would disagree with anything that you just said. And when you said that I was arguing from a point of emotion, absolutely. I didn't, this was unexpected. It was just me kind of throwing my 2 cents into the conversation. I totally admit that was out of emotion. I'm not saying that you're wrong with what you said about, it could be regulated better and done well. I don't have an opinion made up either way. My entire point for what I was saying was just from my personal views of what I saw the negative aspects to be. I'm not saying that it should be illegal. I'm not at all saying that that's.
And I actually respect the fact that one, you're acknowledging that, and you realize that it is obviously we all make arguments from emotion, whether we realize it or not. And I respect the fact that you see that, but it is extremely important not to downplay the importance and the role of data and the significance of actually analyzing the facts. I don't know what data Luciano has. I didn't hear the entire conversation. I might disagree with him on some stuff too, but it is really important when having discussions like this.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually I said, and Godless Cranium can back me up on this. I said that I don't have any data. I'm not here with data. I'm solely doing this from my emotions. I mean, I think I said that twice. Yeah. So yeah, I'm not downplaying whatsoever the role of data. I didn't come into this to debate, Luciano on prostitution. I was just there to fill in for Shannon, which, by the way, thank you, Shannon.
You're welcome. Anytime.
So you know, this is just me reacting there on the spot in a totally emotional way. I mean, you get data in front of me to show me, you know, things that can point to it being a better thing. That if it's decriminalized, then fine. I'm rational. I'm not gonna. It's not a hill I'm gonna die on. But that's just something that came at the time that I was thinking about the negative aspects of it.
And it's worth bringing up too, to play devil's advocate for Kyle a little bit. It's worth bringing up so that, you know, because that's a way that a great deal of people do think and approach things. So it's worth bringing these arguments up because, you know, they're valid to a lot of people. And I mean, I would say that on a certain level, on most levels, I have a disagreement in the conclusion, but I can understand the perspective. Like I said, I wouldn't want somebody that I know cared about or loved to enter into that as a profession. But if they were going to, it would be preferential for me that they were in a safe and protected environment as opposed to going into the environment as it exists now. So I'm going to give Essence of Thought has come in. I invited him in, and Bionic Dance has just joined as well. So, Essence of Thought, do you have anything to contribute? You've been
Yes.
I know you do. I was in the chat with you. I'm well aware.
You only got the half of it. I was also typing on Facebook to certain people.
So much typing.
I think he broke the cap locks.
I did get frozen out a couple of times by the you know, the when you post a certain amount of comments in such a certain period of time, it blocks you for a while. I did get that a couple of times.
I called it. You must have got timed out.
The timeout.
But one of the things
in the corner.
But one of the things that you said that kind of stuck with me is the point that you made that if you couldn't, you know, be happy for your family member entering the field of sex work, for example, you know, that you shouldn't really support the decriminalization. You know, why are you talking about this if you can't support it on that basic sense? And it actually comes very close to an argument I've heard time and time again from apparently well-meaning Christians who go, well, you know, look at the LGBT plus lifestyle. They have higher rates of STIs. They have, you know, higher rates of spousal abuse. They have higher rates of all these issues, you know. And it is true, we do have higher rates of these issues. So why would you support, you know, allowing these people to exist and allowing them their autonomy in that way? It's like, when you ask the question, would you be happy for a loved one to enter, you know, this field? That question cannot be detached from the social context we are in. You know, we're in the social context of sex work has been demonized, it has been devalued, and yes, there are a lot of problems that have come about with the current legal status of the issue. You know, but can you show me a problem? Can you show me a problem in? Can you show me a problem inherent to sex work not existing in any other field of employment? That's one thing I wanted to really get at.
No, and I think maybe what I wasn't communicating properly based on what you're saying is that I don't think that it's the sex work itself that, or where I'm coming from is not, that's not the negative connotation. I'm looking at the things that come along with it, like the drugs, the people that you're around, the constant trying to hide, the violence, the risk of violence that, you know, you don't know if you're getting beat, robbed, your pimp smacking you around. You know, it's not the sex itself. If it was just the act of having sex for money, I have no issue with that whatsoever. That's not where I'm coming from. I'm coming from the stuff that surrounds it also, because it's a package deal almost. You get that with the prostitution. That's the aspect that I'm saying.
But how do you, when you say you get that with prostitution, how do you get that with prostitution and no other field? I mean, there are other fields that have these sorts of issues as well.
Sure, absolutely. I wasn't saying that there wasn't, but we were just talking. You know, I'm coming at it from looking at it at the prostitution aspect of it, and for me, that's just something to take into account. What you said was valid. I see where you're coming from. Absolutely.
Well, and all of those issues seem to be more of a problem with the underground and this world of, you know, crime bosses and pimps and drug boards and whatnot who are, abusing people because it's not out in the open, because it's driven underground. And so there's no legislation, there's no cops checking in to make sure that, people aren't being abused. There's no regulation. And I think, to assume that because it's illegal across the board, that people aren't, who are in this line of work aren't having much worse lives because of that, I think is a little bit of a naive way of looking at it. I'm not saying you're naive, but I'm saying if you go about it from that perspective.
Police are known to sexually assault a lot of prostitutes. It's the common thing. It doesn't get reported by the police, but it gets reported by the sex workers.
Sure.
You were defending this like judicial system, saying, "Oh, they would never, punish a person who'd been forced into prostitution." Well, no, they rape her and they just get rid of her.
I wasn't defending that at all.
No, I think his argument was more so that that's a safety net for them. If they're forced in the scenario when they are forced in, his argument was that. And I'm not advocating for his argument, but I think it might be slightly being misrepresented, because he was essentially just saying that if in a specific scenario, if somebody is forced into prostitution and let's say the police happen to have a raid, they will at least be saved in that scenario. Whereas if they're forced into prostitution in a legal setting, that scenario isn't a possibility. I think that's essentially how his argument drills down, and it has to do just with that specific scenario. It doesn't extrapolate out any farther.
Point. We made it two different points of the conversation. I'll pass over. Sorry.
There's another flaw that needs to be addressed. When this is one of the things that frustrated me when I was chatting with Kyle earlier, and I feel like I didn't do a good job of communicating it. When we're talking about these things that are like package deals, I feel like they're really not. And at least in my opinion, if we're going to talk about legalizing these things, we're talking about legalizing it for the sake of getting rid of the things that Kyle says are a package deal. And I know that Kyle, that was one of the things that I was curious about. I was curious as to why Kyle thought that if we legalize prostitution, it comes with, and we cannot get rid of, or we can't get rid of easily, these other things like gang
never said that.
And STDs. Yeah.
Never said that.
Sorry.
That's what a package deal is.
Yeah, the wording of that was like the wording
when they
Bionic Dance has lost it.
Like package deal, just.
Oh, she heard package.
I mean, we're talking prostitution, and someone says package deal. What else are you gonna think?
No, that's fair.
I'm not saying that you can't get rid of it. I'm not saying that you can't get rid of it. I'm just saying that it seems like all of that is tied in with prostitution. And again,
I can make the same argument for oyster picking.
Absolutely.
In the UK, we've had numerous issues where people are imported to the UK under the pretense that they'll be allowed to go, and then when they get here, they're kept, they're imprisoned. And there was several incidents where they were taken out to the mud flats to pick certain types of shellfish, and one time the tide came in too fast, and they drowned. They all drowned, But no one was calling for a ban to the shellfish industry because, the fish industry has a lot of foreign exploitation, especially when we're dealing with the docks, etc. You do have a lot of, people being imported to do illegal work, and it is horrendous the conditions they live in. No one says we should ban the fish industry. So that goes back to what I was asking, what issues with prostitution or specific aspect of prostitution, what makes it special in this sort of argument?
Well, it seems a lot like it comes down to people have a hang up about sex. Humans, for as long as we can remember, are just like sex is either shameful or icky or just taboo. And that's probably why prostitution is such a huge deal.
And also because of the conditions that prostitution occurs in now, because of the conditions that prostitution occurs in now, there's an added level that's not being addressed. Like there's a psychological component to anything having to do with sexuality. A lot of self-value is tied into sexual behavior. There's a lot of imposed morality that can occur on people regarding their sexual behaviors that they have to contend with. So, I mean, those are things that, unfortunately, people do have to grapple with, which adds a psychological component that can cause real harm to people, even if it's something that they do go into willingly, that they may not realize is an after effect of that choice. I'm not saying that's always something that happens, but it is a real possibility that it could take place and often does take place. So I feel like that is part of what Kyle's arguing for as well, is that, you know, it's that there could be real risk of psychological and emotional long-term damage, even if you go in eyes open. Is that fair, Kyle, to say that that's a component of what you're arguing?
Yeah, it could be. Once again, I'm it's just me on the spot, kind of going through how I feel. It's not the sex aspect of it, though. I don't think that there's anything wrong. Like I said with the porn thing, I don't think there's anything wrong with getting paid to have sex. I'm mainly coming from the just the negative impacts that it had. I'm not saying that there's not any positive by decriminalizing it at all. Once again, I don't really have an opinion either way on the issue. This was just me kind of putting it out there emotionally. And did I probably, well, looking back, did I definitely should have not kept my mouth shut? Absolutely.
No, never. You should always express your opinions.
You should absolutely have expressed your opinion. I'm very happy that you did.
But that's just an honest way of how I was looking at it. I mean, I can't say go back and argue with you guys about where you're coming from either, because you all make points. It's just it's just the way that I was looking at it.
And in fairness, that's what Max started with. Max started with by saying, I don't care what data Luciano has, because data doesn't matter. I am looking at a handful of people that I know who had a bad time. And so Max, even though he ended up agreeing with more than he was saying, I mean, did come from it the same way. It seems like if you come from it from a data perspective, you come to the same logical conclusion, and it's really only emotional that gets you to something else.
That may be true. Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's a fair opinion to bring up. Like these are components that should be touched on so that people can get everybody's perspective. So I'm playing a bit of devil's advocate for Kyle, because I feel like there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people in here. And Kyle, I'm glad you came on, because I'm glad you came on though, because I sensed in the chat that there was people who were just, flat out saying, okay, well, I disagree with you, and period, full stop, without you having the opportunity to elaborate on where you were coming from. So I appreciate everybody coming here so that it can be hashed out.
Yeah, that's and I think that's good. I think it's fine that there are people who disagree with me. I wasn't really taking a hard stance on it one way or the other. I was kind of just stating what the negative aspects were, because it seemed like we were just getting towards the end when Max and Luciano were kind of wrapping up. It just seemed like it was going in a positive direction. I just saw negative aspects to it, and so I voiced those. I'm not saying they're.
Well, I think with some of us were taking. I think I was taking more exception with the fact that you were advocating for a non-data driven way of deciding some of this stuff, and I think that's where a lot of us were kind of extrapolating from. If you took that same argumentation with a lot of these other areas that we deal with on a regular basis, if you allow anecdotes and if you allow personal feelings to be the driver, you get bad decisions on lots of factors. And I think we were more sad about the methodology you were advocating than really the position you were advocating.
Yeah, I can understand that. I probably shouldn't have said it. Once again, it's I was in the moment, and emotions get the best of you, and you say things. I was trying to make the point that to look at it from where I was coming from, because I didn't have data. Like, I didn't come in here prepared with a set list of what we were going to be talking about in terms of the prostitution side of it. So I could only argue from an emotional side of it.
So on the
I would
on the 26th, you'll have a better idea of what to expect, Kyle.
I'm going to run the board. I will run the back aspect of it.
I actually really
yeah.
respect your humility, though, in the way you just said that.
Well, I mean, it's true. Like I've never been one that. I mean, the thing about me is I don't, and I never have thought. I said this earlier too. Like I'm not a philosophy-minded person. Like I don't. I'm a art-minded person. I don't think in terms of like, is this logical? I'm an emotional-based person. So when I go into an area that I don't know anything about or can admit that I should have said it better, then I have no problem doing that. I mean, it doesn't I don't think take anything away from me as a person. I just reacted in a way that, looking back, could have probably been handled better. Absolutely. But I don't have that kind of, most of you guys in here have the mindset of the philosophical aspect, the fallacies, and that's just not ever been the way that I look at things, and that's okay. But I
only do that because I'm an Aries.
Oh my god!
I mean, it's not a bad thing or a good thing. It's just a different level of looking and seeing things. I have a more artsy kind of mind. It's a little scatterbrained sometimes, but I totally see where I could have gone back and change things. Mainly with saying yes, I will host with Godless Cranium.
This is essentially all my fault, is what Kyle's trying to say.
But at least GT is muting himself while he's typing now.
Oh yeah, thanks for that.
I mean, the plus side to the artistic thing is that your thumbnails are on fleek.
Well, good. I at least I have that going for me.
So it's really.
I'm surprised no one gave me shit for saying on fleek.
I was thinking about it.
I'm holding it in.
The glaring anger is taking away from that.
So it's really important that we all acknowledge, or at the very least, most of us, because most of us live in areas where we're surrounded by theists and by people who don't, not just theists, but people who don't talk about these sorts of things, people who don't pay attention to fallacies, and people who don't care a whole lot about these debates. Because a lot of what Kyle said, I agree with. And we might draw like different conclusions from that and all that, but like I completely understand where he's coming from in just about everything that he said. And I think that that's the way. I think that was an example of a good conversation. I'd like to believe that it was, because that's definitely one of the better conversations I've had about something this loaded so far in my life.
Yeah, all of us crazy atheists have we have the most respectful, reasonable dialogues amongst each other.
I did my best to mess it up by inviting Max, but
well, to be fair though, it was messed up as soon as you were there.
It's almost like we need atheism is unstoppable up in this joint.
Oh no!
Please no. Please no.
Don't invoke that.
Just bring him and TJ and Steve Shives and Sargon in a room.
Oh, gosh.
They're the ones who pay us. Come on, we say bad things about those guys.
Yeah, that's right. The Illuminati will hear us.
I'm just surprised at how tame Max was. I mean,
so was
I've only had minor dealings with him before, and it's been like completely different.
I've managed to completely miss his existence until tonight. I don't even know. No, seriously, no idea who he is.
I had the displeasure of dealing with him before because he made the accusation that he truly believed I would personally take some sort of enjoyment if I saw Christian children hanging from the trees.
You mean you wouldn't?
Stop.
He seriously said that. No, actually.
You realize Bionic Dance that he's going to take that soundbite and use it.
He actually lost his mind on me briefly because I said that you were a nice guy once, Essence of Thought. I said you were a nice guy, and he...
That was enough for him to call Shannon a Nazi, just because he thought Essence of Thought was a nice person.
That's what he called me before as well. He called me both. He said I'm no different to a Nazi or KKK member, and that he truly believed that if I were to see children hanging from the trees, Christian children hanging from the trees, I would rejoice or whatever.
Oh my gosh, that's awful. I am sorry to set that to you.
Can there even be such a thing as a liberal Nazi?
Potentially not. But he did fantastic tonight. That he was very measured and balanced, and he may have turned a corner. So we would want to encourage that, I would think. And
Yeah.
well, that's
seemed
better than the alternative.
He seemed turned
which is
back,
vitriol.
but it was just more that he seemed to want to go on every sort of tangent that he could to insult feminists or insult atheists or whatever. It was just going after whatever group he could on whatever tangent sounded somewhat reasonable.
That's something I would like to address here. Well, I have all of you guys here. If we can, we'll give Kyle a break and the prostitution discussion a break. Is the
oh no, whatever will I do?
Oh, poor Kyle. I know. I'm sorry that I ruined your life, Kyle. So regarding Max in the discussion, I thought overall he was very measured, but I did notice that he did take opportunities to address atheism as though it was, a specific ideology, and atheist thought or like atheist groupthink was a thing. And I'm interested. You guys are people that I respect, and I would like your opinion on that.
Old habits die hard.
Baby steps, right?
Yeah.
So what's your opinion on that as atheists having groupthink and us having a unified ideology?
Considering I've had arguments with half the people here, I don't think that works.
Yeah, there was definitely a time early in my YouTube career when I butted heads with a bunch of atheists, usually over the topic of whether or not babies are atheists.
We have butted heads, Kate.
Yes.
I remember.
and so, I mean, clearly there are aspects of atheism as a community, I guess, that where we disagree pretty heavily and will argue amongst ourselves. That's kind of a side effect of being skeptics, I'm sure.
Right. That's fair. So how do you guys feel? It really bothers me when I hear somebody represent that atheists think this way or atheists are doing this, because so far as I can tell, there really isn't a unified ideology. So it upsets me because it makes me feel as though it's an attempt to make us less ubiquitous and vilify us especially when you're having emotionally charged moral discussions.
The irony in that is that we pride ourselves in literally doing the exact opposite of what he's talking about. So he's talking about just groupthink and conformity to a particular set of doctrines or a creed or something. We don't have a holy book. We identify as free thinkers. We have discussions like this where literally half of us are telling Kyle that he's wrong and Kyle is presenting his position, and half of us have argued over different issues with each other at one point or another. Mm-hmm. And we try to do it respectfully. We try to build community, and we are united around the notion of critical thinking and free thought is more valuable, than just dogmatically taking all of this religious stuff point blank on faith. And so while there's a couple things that we do unite on, we think you can be good without God. We think that you don't have to get your laws and stuff from an ancient holy book, but you can, you should have separation of church and state. Like there's a few points that we do agree on, which is what we've kind of formed a community around. But to say that there's no individual thought and that there's no disagreement, I think is absolutely insane. I've never seen a group with so much individualism than in the atheist movement, where you have everyone, people say hurting atheists is like hurting cats. It's like,
that's true.
Well, there's a reason that they say that. It's because we think very differently.
Well, I've hypothesized about it before, but I think the main reason they do it is it's a shut up tactic. They're like, you atheists are a religion too. You're just like us. So shut up. Your arguments can't be used against us because then you're arguing against yourselves, essentially. And I mean, obviously that doesn't work.
When someone says you're just as bad as us, isn't that basically them admitting that they've already lost the argument?
Well, I don't think it's a just as bad as us thing. I think that it's a comparison. Like for us, when we argue, if they're making atheism tantamount to a religion, that's them saying you have an ideology, so you can't say ideologies are bad.
But I mean, it goes even beyond it being a religion. Like we understand that religions have different doctrines, and people still have their own individualistic codes that get influenced by their religion. We acknowledge that fact. We may say this is what your scripture says. How do you feel about this and account for that sort of thing? But we don't typically say you Christians believe this unless it's a very specific aspect, such as Christ is the savior.
Yes.
But I think it's more than just like a stifling technique. I think it's also part of the narrative in literally alienating us. I mean, you know, you look at sci-fi films. What's the best way to create an alien fictitious race that's completely detached from our perception? Well, you create a hive mind. You know, the idea of this insidious other, you know, the Arachnids from Starship Troopers, the aliens from the Alien series, they all share like a hive mind. It's because
Independence Day.
We're so used to, you know, individual perception that if I can sort of present this group as being sort of different in this way, that they all think the nihilistic same perspective or whatever, then there's a sort of nagging undertone to that of othering.
Well, and there's also a certain amount of projection going on. I mean, the religious groups that we encounter the most do engage in a certain amount of indoctrination. They have a hive mind of sorts. I mean, it's not perfect. They're not the Borg, but still that. And so they look at atheists, and I guess they're projecting that on us, but that's the last thing we are.
Yeah, I completely agree. The only thing that I find atheists have in common is that they all hold very staunchly to their own individual perspective. That's literally the only thing, and they don't believe in God. Those are the only things that I've found they have in common. I mean, I'm very lucky that I found a group of people that have like goals when it comes to atheism, but that's not every atheist. That's the group that I've managed to gravitate towards because we have like goals, and that happens in any scenario. When you have a goal, you're going to find people that share your view and your perspective and gravitate towards them. That's just the way people work.
I do think it's important though that I think atheists aren't immune to forming cliques or groups and then not calling out people in that group when they say something dumb. And I think that's important to guard against as well, right? Like, I mean, we have to be able to, even though say, I'll just use Paul as an example. Even though I like Paul and I think Paul's a great person and I agree with him on 99% of things, if he says something that I disagree with strongly enough, then I should be able to say, look, Paul, I don't agree with you, right? Just like we did here with Kyle, kind of thing. But I don't think we're immune to that, and I think we have to be guarded against that as well. That tribalism.
Well, I mean, I actually help staff an atheism booth, sort of an outreach kind of thing in Balboa Park here in San Diego. It's on Saturdays. I came from there just an hour or two ago. And I was watching some of my fellow atheists having a discussion with a theist in the street, trying to basically explain why creationism isn't correct. And at one point, one of them said something about geology, which is not my field, so I couldn't offer any input, but another was like, whoa, wait a minute, you got your facts wrong. It was like fill in the blank here. And they had a slight back and forth over who had the facts correct on the geology issue. So, I mean, at least the group I'm in doesn't seem to have a lot of difficulty or inhibition in calling each other out on stuff.
I think.
How about we hear from I was going to say, how about we hear from you? Because I just saw your Facebook message.
It was you in this instance.
That's how you want to. Yes, go ahead.
Oh, me?
No. Luciano, I saw your message in like the YouTube chat. I said, "How about we have the star of the night go ahead?" And then you started talking. It's like, oh shit!
Wait, the star of the night. That's not what. I was just gonna say. I think it's important that we realize that theists are using a different definition of religion than we are. I feel like in this conversation, we are looking at religion as like a belief in a divine being with specific moral codes that people can find community in. And then theists are looking at religion as like any sort of community that unites around common goals and has possibly a shared sense of moral values. And those are very different definitions of religion.
Oh yeah, my theistic sister figures that sports fans, like if you're a particular sports fan team, that's a religion as far as she's concerned. She's okay with that.
Well, it's
look at
also
the polytheistic definition of religion. Then
Jordan.
yes.
It's Jordan Peterson right there. That's what that is.
Yeah,
Yes,
that's a Durkheimian
exactly.
model, though. That's the model that's used in most scientific research regarding religion. The Emile Durkheim's model is used, and that
That's the
model
substantive model.
Yeah.
Substantive model.
Right. Well, yes, and the reason that it omits the supernatural, and the reason that it omits the supernatural is because if there's no naturalistic way to measure supernatural components, and also it would overextend the definition of religion to incorporate almost anything that's considered a supernatural belief. So instead, it substitutes a supernatural component with sacred objects. And so aside from the sacred objects, everything else that you mentioned was the Durkheimian model. And
Profane.
Yeah.
yeah.
But I don't think you can actually take the supernatural element out of it.
I agree. It's just used in social sciences essentially, and only for practical purposes. But because it's only used for practical purposes when you're measuring things naturalistically, so that the model itself doesn't overextend, so it becomes more quantifiable essentially within the research, that's taken advantage of colloquially when we're having these sorts of discussions by theists, so that they can overextend the understood definition of religion, which has a clear supernatural and deistic component that's left out of that model. Like there's no God in the model of religion that under Durkheim, and that is what allows them that opportunity. And I think that's an important thing to understand when you're addressing them, because it is an existing model and that's what they lean on, but it omits those components.
Well, but it kind of is a bit of a gradient, because you have religions that are not theistic, like Buddhism, or at least secular Buddhism, that I think most people would say, falls in the category of religion. They have beliefs, they have, kind of a way of life, a philosophy, a way of thinking. They'll have, people, even like a hierarchy of leadership. They have temples, they have all kinds of, things, rituals that they undertake and that they do. Depending on the sect of Buddhism that you're in, it varies from one to another, just like with any other religion. But there's no God at the front of it, at the face of it. And you have other, beliefs and ideologies that may be, polytheistic, they may be deistic, they may be theistic, they may be atheistic. But to say that atheism in itself, just the fact that we don't have a God, that's a religion, is utter nonsense.
Yeah, I think that's the difference, is that the Buddhism has like a really complex web of philosophies and beliefs, right? Like it overarches their entire lives, right? So
there's a doctrine as well in Buddhism.
Yeah.
There's a clear doctrine where they're like, we're hapless essentially when it comes to, we don't have a doctrine.
Yeah, like there's no like book of atheism that tells us how to act or what to think.
Well, and I mean, not to drag us backward too hard, but the whole idea of having a religion without a supernatural bit of content, it just sort of, I mean, I look at some of the other things that would have to qualify, and I'm like, I've never seen anybody offer up a sacrifice to Gene Roddenberry, for example.
I love Gene Roddenberry. I love him now.
You were in my living room.
I have a
earlier.
Star Wars person.
I mean, I have seen arguments between Trekkies, but usually they're not over some specific doctrine, but just about a bit of like fandom or something. It doesn't really come off the same. I mean,
they're not blowing each other up.
And they don't live their life by the tenets of that either.
Well, some do, but
I have yet to see a Trekkie. I have yet to see a Trekkie go to war and slaughter, a bunch of Star Wars fans because, of a difference in fandom.
Yeah, and I mean, I know violence has erupted at sporting events, but still, it's not the same.
Yeah, but
I'm in a multi-science fiction relationship. I'm a Trekkie, and my boyfriend, unfortunately, is Team Star Wars. So I'm just saying that that's different than, like, if we were Catholic and Muslim, that probably wouldn't be a thing, right?
Team Firefly. They should
Oh,
bring it
that's
back.
fair. That's fair. Shiny.
I'll never forget the Comic-Con, though, where one Harry Potter fan stabbed another with a pin.
Really?
In Hall H. It was awesome. Well, it wasn't awesome. It was actually quite horrifying, but anyway.
So he dobbied him.
Yeah, he dobbied him. It was, there was a fight over fandom and someone got stabbed. Anyway, I digress.
Did they arrest him? And after they arrested him to get his freedom, did he have to get a sock?
Yeah, no. He was arrested. If you've ever been to San Diego Comic-Con, there are more police and EMTs per square inch because there's heart attacks every couple hundred feet. as you can imagine.
I should go to that sometime. I live in San Diego now. I haven't been to the Comic-Con yet.
It's 150,000 people in one building. What can go wrong?
I mean, again, I think that it is the supernatural element that distinguishes religion from other, let's call them fandoms.
Right.
It's like necessary, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And in everybody's day-to-day definitions, and people who identify themselves as religion, people who self-identify in that fashion, they're not self-identifying as religious because they have a group of people who share, common goals. That would identify them as a community in my mind, but not as a religion. A religion, you would need a doctrine, and you would need most likely supernatural components or a deity. In most instances, a deity. And
goes back to.
Go ahead, yeah.
I was going to mention this because we're sort of touching now on Burnett Tyler and his basic definition, or of a minimum definition of religion, the belief in spiritual beings. Burnett Tyler was old anthropologist trying to figure out how to define religion. So
right.
It sort of bases on that compared to the Durkheim.
Right, yeah, and I don't agree. I feel like the Durkheimian model is just abused in discourse a great deal because it is so vague. And that allows, when you're having a conversation with a theist regarding these sorts of aspects, it allows them to overextend and give you that accusation. But it's really important to know that definition, I think, when you're entering these types of dialogues, and to know that the sacred objects component is very important, and it's also referential to a church. So if you know that component, that allows you an opportunity to realistically counter and say, okay, what are the sacred objects of atheism that we unify around? There aren't. So that's the counter to that argument. So that's why I bring it up, because that's important.
You'll hear theists say like the God delusion is our holy writ or something.
Yeah, that's right.
So go ahead and burn one of those and see how many of us get outraged.
You'll probably laugh.
Well, you got to think about the person who is debating tonight. It's Max, right? Whose personal experience has been that atheists turned on him, or he professes that when he started to have questions about some of the side issues, that he felt he was turned on. And so I think that's one of the important things we need to always be cognizant that we demonstrate, is that that we are not turning on someone, as hopefully no one thinks we were turning on Kyle. We all love Kyle, and
Kyle's garbage.
You can always count on GC to make sure that the room doesn't. Nobody can feel good about themselves when GC's there.
Not when I'm around.
Not for 5 seconds.
But you guys, I'm still pretty satisfied with all the stuff that happened today. But saying that GC is probably going to come in and step all over it.
Hey, Luciano, I thought you did amazing tonight, by the way. If no one's told you that already, you did a great job tonight.
Thank you. Today was my first ever live debate, you guys. And I know that people still don't know who I am, but it feels nice to be on other people's spaces and interacting with their audiences.
I think that's one thing though about the Max thing, is that I think that's kind of something that naturally happens on YouTube. I don't want it to happen to me, but where some content creators, if you have a group of content creators, so say there's 50 of them, and they all kind of talk about stuff, and they're talking about, I don't know, religion or SJW stuff or whatever it is. And then that kind of, they feel like their channel isn't going to get any bigger if they don't talk about something else. They start attacking each other to get more subs and more views, right? Because drama sells. So I think there's a certain subset of every kind of community or whatever that will start to turn on each other. Maybe that happened to Max. I don't know. I wasn't around then. So
I've been trying really hard to avoid that lately. I mean, I'd love to have more subscribers, but I want to stick to the topic. I've had people actually tell me that I'm one of the few atheist YouTubers they know who's stuck to atheism, who hasn't moved on to other topics.
Yeah, I find that there's a lot of that. It seems that people kind of start out discussing, atheism and things that surround atheism and atheist issues, and then almost sort of parlay into social commentary as just a natural progression. But when that happens for me as a viewer, I disconnect from them. Because
Yeah,
that's
I mean,
not the reason I subscribed to them. I subscribed to them because those are the issues that are valid to me. And I feel like they changed and I didn't change with them. And that's when I part ways with people.
Well,
to be
not
perfectly
to
honest.
rip on anybody, but I unsubbed from Mr. Repsion for that reason, because he stopped talking about atheist issues and I kind of wasn't into what he'd moved on to. And
Right.
I mean, I almost made a video about how the Boy Scouts are now the Scouts letting girls in and everything.
Right.
But I looked and like the article I saw only briefly mentioned religion and atheism and how that's tolerated in the new version or even the original version of the Scouts. And I was like, this is not really my channel. So I let it go sort of in the name of integrity, but it might have made a good video, even clickbaity possibly. I don't know.
I respect that. I do. I respect it.
I gotta kind of disagree because I feel like there can be a lot of everyone understands. I've recently started talking about certain topics more and more recently, so I got to defend myself. I feel like sometimes people can feel a bit too boxed in. I mean, like my channel did not start out as an atheist channel.
Okay.
Like everyone watching this is probably like, what? You know, like it started out as a sociology channel. You know, but it just so happened beliefs in society were my particular sociology interest at that time. So, you know, that's what I got into. I also got into the conversations because they generally interested me more. But now I feel I need to sort of broaden out, but I'm not doing it like, okay, I'm no longer talking about religion. I'm just going to talk about these other topics. You know, I am trying to keep sort of balance. I feel there is room for that. I feel there's room for every type of channel.
Well, that's not an atheist specific YouTube phenomenon. Any channel that starts very specifically on one thing, if they want, will drift, but they also have to drift. If they want to keep their original audience, they need to drift in ways that are obviously very gradually tangential. They can't, skew all, like all of a sudden I was doing makeup and now I'm doing video games. Well, that doesn't help. So anyway, I'm just saying this isn't a case of atheists turning on each other. This is just a YouTube phenomenon. If a creator is not obligated to stay on one topic forever, nor can they expect that their audience will stick with them through every change. Like, it's a trial and error thing. Every creator has to find their own way.
Yeah,
Well, I think it also...
Sorry, go ahead. I was just gonna say I honestly agree with Essence that I don't mind when channels kind of branch out and do, say Kate was to do that thing on the Boy Scouts. I would have clicked on that. I would have watched it. So I think that's an interesting topic. Now, if she does if a channel that's doing just atheism does like one video every once in a while, that's different. I'm cool with that. But if it's like a Mr. Repsion thing where he just completely goes in the other direction, not completely, but I mean he went to like gaming mostly, right? Then yeah, I'm out. I'm clicking off the channel. Yeah, that's a hard shift. Yeah.
Essence of thought when you bring up your channel, I mean, you initially talked about sociology and then you kind of interplayed atheism into that, and so it's a natural transition to talk about other things in that field because atheism interplays with many fields. So for example, my channel is focused a great deal right now on communication strategy, and one of the reasons it's focused on communication strategy is because as an atheist I went out into, I guess, the marketplace of ideas, the public forum and the discourse, and I found that it was mostly just streams of people screaming at each other and beating each other over their head with their ideas, and I was frustrated with what I was watching in a lot of instances. So that, and my background is in communication strategy, so now it's the interplay between the two. But I mean I could see myself focusing on communication strategy and not having an interplay with atheism, but that's still in the essence of my original channel.
But you could even transition over into like YouTube, just say like how to communicate better through YouTube videos. Like you could transition into things that would incorporate the main idea, right? Just like say like my channel, I could transition into doing more supernatural things. I've done a couple of them, but I mean more supernatural things or historical things dealing with religion. I mean, you can transition in that kind of sphere, but not completely leave the sphere altogether, right?
Well, I think
Yes,
two
the
excellent
hardships.
examples of this is one, Sam Harris kind of got started, criticizing religion and talking about, big, deep philosophical issues like, the existence of free will, or, is it okay to lie, and stuff like that, and God in America. But because he is he's an intellectual and he's a thinker, and he is a neuroscientist, and he likes to look at things from an intellectual perspective. When he started his podcast and he started putting out videos on all kinds of different topics, he was able to have a wide breadth of areas to talk about, but he's doing it kind of through a similar lens. You always kind of know sort of what you're going to get. Another good example is Rationality Rules has, from the beginning, his videos have been taking down poor arguments and pointing out logical fallacies. And he does that a lot with religious arguments, and he does that a lot with atheist videos. But at the same time, like lately, he's been going after Jordan Peterson. Not necessarily on religious stuff. Sometimes it's just really poor argumentation, but he just rips it apart and shows how it's a bad line of thinking and it's nonsensical. And I think when you make it broad enough like that, so like my channel it's anti-cult and it's pro-science. I can cover everything from psychics to homeopathy to anti-vaxxers. There's a huge range within there. And for me, ultimately, I have a love of science. So I want to branch more into scientific topics, but at the base of it, there's always this: I'm opposed to dogmatic thinking. I'm opposed to cult-like manipulation tactics. And when you frame your stuff that way, then I think you're able to bring in a much broader audience, and they'll understand, rather than just going from like makeup to video game movies,
Sometimes I kind of regret not starting a second channel specifically for atheism, because my channel did do a hard shift like that. The name Bionic Dance is a reference to my favorite cartoon show from the 80s. My channel started out as an animation channel because that's what I do. If you've seen my videos, you know that. But like the name Bionic Dance was supposed to be associated with my animation work. And then about, 10 years ago, I started doing atheism videos. And now I'm like, well, shit, the name is associated with atheism instead. And if I ever start like an animation studio, which is unlikely, but let's suppose, and I call it Bionic Dance Animation, people are going to go, hey, wait a second. And so I like I said, I regret not starting a second channel that's specifically for atheism. I've started a new one that's mostly for video games. But I mean, if you're going to do a hard shift like that, like there was no way I was doing video games on my main channel. I think it's perfectly valid to start a completely new channel.
For sure. Because then your branding is consistent. And I think that's what it all speaks to, is that people are subscribing to you as a brand, as an individual person. So like to speak to Thomas and to speak to Essence and to speak to you and to speak to GC, all of you have an essential brand. And what he referenced regarding Sam Harris, like when you watch Sam Harris speak or listen to Sam Harris speak, you have an essential idea of what his position is going to be in that dialogue based on your history viewing him. So when you tune into somebody's channel, you kind of want to see something along that vein because that's what you subscribe to. And I mean, maybe it's somebody who's viewing things from an atheistic perspective, but it's the hard shifts that I'm talking about. Like when somebody is primarily an atheist channel and is speaking about atheism from a specific perspective, or atheism's interplay with different aspects of society or science or whatever, and then you tune into their channel and they're playing video games, or Paul's doing a makeup tutorial, which I'm not going to get out of my head now, to be fair. That's not something I have to live with now. Then that causes a lot of dissonance with you, and you want to detach because that's not what you're there for, I think, is ultimately what I was saying, but maybe wasn't communicating very well, if that makes sense.
I think that this is a very interesting discussion, but then there's like weird individuals like me where like my channel isn't super focused. And I feel like people who subscribe to hear what I've got to say about a variety of issues. But what's interesting to me is like some of my best received videos have been me talking about various styles of communication. Like my personal favorite video that I've done, and I'm going to be releasing a new video tomorrow, which is going to be very creative. And if anyone here has ever seen my videos, that is going to be a hard shift because I am an extremely dry presenter in videos. But like I want to change, but that's scary. I want to be like creative and stuff, but that's a little bit worrying for me because I'm not that sort of person, at least not in this style. But like a lot of my best and a lot of my most well-received videos have been talking about communication, which is not anything that I study. studied. It's not anything that I have an intuitive connection to, but I talk about the way people present their arguments. And like people seem to genuinely enjoy that, which really surprises me.
Well,
They
if I
do
ever
enjoy
start
it,
doing
obviously.
like
They
that-
subscribe to my channel. That's literally
I
all
did subscribe to your channel. I subscribed to your channel forever ago, and I shilled it hard.
Bless your heart. I make videos now.
If I ever start a channel like that, I'm gonna call it Communicate.
Oh,
For it though, that's not fair. My name's Luciano, which is a dope name, but like it doesn't lend itself well to this.
yeah. Communis
Yep.
Shannon doesn't. Yeah, doesn't. Do
Fine, like
it.
that. If you start a pun channel, I'm out. I'm not in. I'm gone.
I'll
Okay.
like
Oh, come on.
But I'll follow your Star Wars channel, so that'll be good.
All right.
I have a Twitter handle, Essence of Tweet. It's associated with the Essence of Media YouTube channel.
There's someone who lives near me, I don't know who it is, whose Wi-Fi signal is called New England Clam Router.
I actually laugh at Essence of Thoughts, your opening where it says like essence of video production and stuff. I love that. It's like my favorite part.
Essence of everything.
Yeah.
It was a good name to have, that you can brand everything the same. Essence of this, that, and the other. There's also a person, I think it's on Tumblr, Essence of Thought, who produces crystal sex toys. And I just came across them. It's like
I have so much Googling to do right now.
I'm going to follow you. I'm just going to follow you out the blue.
What was that name again?
I think it's Essence of Thought. It might be Essence Production. I'll try finding it.
Oh, that's funny.
Well, you should start a martial arts channel called Essence of Thought.
Essence. Paul left. Paul's had enough.
I'll just be over here.
Literally. I'm out. I'm done.
Comment section on this is fantastic. I really hope you guys are reading it.
Oh, I'm not. I'm awful. I'm sorry. This is my channel. I should be better. This is my first live stream, but I'm usually so engaged in the conversation that I don't pay a great deal of attention to live stream.
Have you
I'd
learned
love
nothing
to
from
read
me,
the
Shannon?
thought or read the chat, but I don't know how to pull it up from here.
You would have to go to the actual live stream that's taking place in it, and you can see it scrolling on the side.
Yeah,
I normally I'll go to the actual one, and then I'll just click on the little 3 dots and do a pop-out chat.
I just have like 2 separate windows. So like I have our Google Hangout window, and then I have like the live stream. I have it muted because I'm a firm believer in like 2 screens.
Oh, I love 2 screens, to be fair. Yeah, at my office, I can't live without my 2 screens when I get home.
I was out of university until last year, and like the double screen computers were my life.
Oh, good. The chat forgives me. Thanks, chat. I apologize.
I got hooked on 2 screens, and then I started traveling, and I got downgraded just to a laptop screen to do all my editing on, and it was kind of a painful
That must be a
transition, but
nightmare.
I've gotten used to it. At least it's high res enough that it can cram a lot in one. But
Some guy named Dirty Holloway just followed me on Twitter, and it says, I am a Christian immaterialist and a conservative. I don't know why they follow me. Why are you following me?
Because they want to fight with you.
Like, hey, like people like SJ and all of them follow you?
Yeah, we talk to them all the time, though.
Yeah.
Like we go on non-sec and discuss, or the Geek Room or on Twitter and have discussions with SJ. I've had many discussions with SJ on air, off air, on Twitter.
Like SJ, she seems.
Yeah,
I don't know. It seems
I do
like
too.
I could have like a neat conversation.
yeah.
I don't mind
she's
SJ.
interesting. Yeah, she's somebody that I never mind speaking to. She has never disrespected me in a conversation. She has disagreed with me ardently, but has never disrespected me in a conversation.
I don't mind
I
Max,
must have
though.
missed
so I
something.
might
Which one's SJ?
Stephanie Thomason. I believe.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know that one.
You need to spend more time on Twitter, Kate.
Oh, see, I use Twitter almost not at all.
Oh, see, this is where Twitter's where everything goes down.
Where everything goes down. Like y'all think that we're playing, but we're not.
I use Twitter until there's like a massive group chat that I get added to, and right now I think I got added to like 10 different ones, and I'll open one up and it'll say like 500 unread messages. I'm like, nope.
I don't want to chat that.
I'm just not.
Because I tend to be a little too verbose, and so having a limited number of characters, I'm like, what's the point of this shit? So.
Because you can take it to DMs.
Well, it's like eventually you can, you know, you can spend your entire day just responding to tweets on the internet, or you can go out and make a video and stuff. And I've found that when I make a video, then it actually is more impactful than just responding to one tweet. Now I try to engage as much as I can, and like when I'm free or something, like if I've got a minute, I'm gonna try to respond to as much stuff as I can. But you know, you have to at some point kind of take a step back too and pull away from social media.
That's fair. I'm finding that too. Like I have over 1,200 followers on Twitter, which is a relatively new thing. I've only been on Twitter since July. So at first I got a notification. I was like, yay, somebody likes me. Now I wake up in the morning to 150 plus notifications. And I'm like, I don't even know where to start. I don't want to ignore you, but I have no idea who you are. I'm tagged in strings that I don't even know what they're about. Like if I had $1 for every time I was tagged on Twitter, and literally it just said, "Hey Shannon, did you see this?" And then I don't know what it is.
I just mute the conversation if it's not something I'm interested in.
Well, I got tagged in a chat with 35 other people, and it just dominated my notifications list. And I was like, because I mean, people do respond to me, and I try to respond to them, but I never look at anything outside of notifications. Just because, and yeah, that just like flooded my notifications. That one chat, and I was like, eh.
I do like triggering the classical theist, though. That's probably my favorite thing to do.
Oh my gosh, don't! Oh my goodness. Oh.
Like once a week or so, I do it.
Hey, Godless, it looks like Dirty Holloway followed me too.
Oh,
the Christian. I don't know if he's like watching our thing right now.
Oh, maybe, yeah.
Oh my gosh, me too. Yeah, I think so.
What if he's a closet atheist who still has a religious Twitter profile?
I don't know. His pinned thing is a resurrection of Jesus, the historical evidence. I'm not sure he's a closet atheist.
He's gonna save us. That's what's about to happen. We're all about to get saved.
I just want to acknowledge that Essence of Thought found the thing he was talking about earlier, and like, it's definitely not safe for work. Like, oh yeah, that's right. Some of us had that whole conversation a while ago, the Follower Friday thing. But yeah, this is very definitely not safe for work.
Now I feel bad because the chat saying, "We'll stop tweeting at you." That's not what I meant. I just meant that I feel awful because I wake up to so many notifications and I don't know where to start, and I feel obligated, and I want to respond to everybody. And I know that there's people I'm missing responding to, and I'm afraid they're going to think that I'm ignoring them. That's what I meant.
You have to be more heartless like us.
Please keep tweeting at me. I love interacting with you guys. Please don't stop tweeting at me. Just please don't get upset if I don't respond to you. It's just because sometimes the onslaught of notifications is just too much for me to get to in real life. That's what I meant. But I feel like we're kind of at the point where I have to go to sleep.
Oh, can I show the quartz love wand? If you can just click my icon. I'll just quickly show the. I found this one day whilst looking around. Apparently, I can win a lovely rose quartz twisted love wand if I follow this user.
You know what that reminds me of?
Oh, perfect.
Gwyneth Paltrow.
Oh
God.
Oh God. That's probably not claiming to, make your vagina, healthier.
Realigning chakras in a new way.
Have you guys seen like some of the goop stuff that she promotes?
Yes.
They're spoofing her on Modern Family.
Oh, good. I hope so. Because
I don't know if you guys watch that show. I do because I'm 12. I have to wonder if I am. I'm legit curious if I'm the youngest person here. I wouldn't be surprised if I'm not, but I probably am. But yeah, in the latest season of Modern Family, they're doing like a direct spoof of Gwyneth Paltrow and Goop.
Yeah, that's just dangerous. People died because she suggested bee sting therapy. for people without considering the fact that,
People are allergic.
these things, people are allergic and maybe don't realize they're allergic, or people can develop allergies. And also these things are toxic. That's why people.
Yeah, but Shannon, dead people can't sue you.
Yeah, their families can. Their families can. But yeah, I'm not a fan. Scientist Mel actually has like full out thrown down the gauntlet to challenge her, and I would love to see that because Scientist Mel is just absolutely brilliant, and I would love to watch her walk.
There's no way Paltrow's going on her channel.
No, I know, but still, it's
like zero chance of that.
I still like watching her debunk her foolishness, and if even one person sees it and it has their mind changed, it's worth every second that she puts into
They
it.
can barely get Gwyneth to go on to Avengers 4, so.
On the one hand, it's unlikely that she would, but do you guys know Dr. Jennifer Gunter?
No, I don't.
She basically goes at like hard after Goop and their stuff and does takedown articles left and right, and she was featured on, I think she was on the Thinking Atheist podcast, and like her Twitter profile just really took off,
right.
And it was getting so much traction that like Goop responded specifically to her, and like Gwyneth Paltrow hates her.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
So I mean, you can actually,
right.
Well, you never know which videos or whatever is going to go viral, right?
Well, and if you're actually putting out, there's a lot of harmful stuff that celebrities will push, but you can be a big enough thorn in their side that you can at least dissuade some people from
Yeah, which is my point. Even one person, and she has a larger reach than one person. I mean, she has thousands of Twitter followers, and
doesn't she have millions or?
No, I'm talking about scientists now. Yeah, but
Oh.
Gwyneth Paltrow has millions. That's unfortunate, but yeah.
Ken Ham hates me by name, so keep the dream alive.
That's true.
That's my dream
true. That's right. Ken Ham now writes articles about Paul. A year ago, Paul was just quietly hating him, and
All I get is Matt Powell.
who he is.
I gotta go, guys. But thanks for the after show, Shannon. Thanks. That was awesome.
Yeah, actually, it's like 8:35 in the PM here, and I haven't had dinner yet, so I'm gonna make like a baby and head out.
In the morning. Yeah, it's 12:39 here.
Stay here.
I live in India.
I can't.
All right, everybody say bye to the chat. I'm going to stop broadcasting.
Take care.
Bye, chat.
Bye.